Thanks, Imad and Brian, for being a part of this. It's a pleasure to have both of you join the Cure podcast series. We've been doing this for a couple of months now, and it was from day one kind of my intent to get both of you as one of the participants talking about AI. But before we jump into AI, I'd like for both of you to introduce yourself to our audience. And apart from your role, maybe mention something that most people do not know about you, something personal and something that will be a reveal on the podcast. Imad, maybe you'll go first, and we'll have Brian go next.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Yes, my name is Imad B Nijim. I'm the CIO of vRad. I've been with vRad for about a little north of 3 years. I've been in healthcare IT my whole career since my first job out of college, working in oncology systems. I'm really excited about our partnership, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I think throughout my career, I've seen waves of innovations come and go, and AI is really one of the most exciting things that's been happening for a long time. So really happy to speak about it, and looking forward to it. I don't know that I can have a reveal, something personal. I love travel. I love international travel. I've been to about 25 countries throughout my life. I love hiking and canoeing. So I do a lot of that. Actually, in a few weeks, we're going to the Boundary Waters on the border of Minnesota and Canada to do some canoeing. So those are my two personal comments.
Oh, great. No, I'm sure you would be, that's travel internationally is something I share as well. And I'm itching, and our family is itching when travel opens up to, just go to a new place. Yeah.
It's been strange. It's been strange being at home. So yeah, I'm looking forward to everything coming back to normal.
Great. Thanks, Imad. Brian, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Brian Baker. Thanks for having us on this. Really appreciate it. I've been at vRad and in the medical space for about 10 years. And I have been part of the AI team almost since the beginning, about 5 years ago, I think, at vRad. So it's been exciting to see sort of the evolution of the space, and it's been really fast. Let's see. I don't know that I have any big secrets either. I like dogs. I like fishing, the outdoors. I'm okay with the cold, so that's why I live in Minnesota. And I also, like you guys, am excited, to travel even just locally, to be able to go around the United States, and just take road trips and stuff again without having to worry about quite as much of our surroundings as we've had the last few months. Yeah, almost a year and a half now, I guess.
Yeah, more than a year now. Amen to that, and I'm pretty confident at least RSNA will be in person this year. So even if it's extreme winters of Chicago, I'm sure we'll have a lot of enthusiasm and interest, because people, all of us, will be dying to just be outside and meet in person, as opposed to what we've been doing for the last 16, 18 months. Great, thanks again. So Imad, a question for you. You are the Chief Information Officer and part of the leadership team at vRad. And we look at vRad as the leader in terms of teleradiology as it's grown in the United States, perhaps one of the biggest in the world. As an insider, how do you see teleradiology adoption trending? Do you think it's reached its peak? Do you think there is still a lot of potential for teleradiology to grow? Just let's start with the industry and how teleradiology is playing a role in radiology in the US.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I mean, teleradiology started out as a nice to have about 20 years ago. Actually, vRad is celebrating its 20th year in radiology this year. So, and we really kind of over the 2 decades, we've led the charge into what is teleradiology and how to continue to innovate in making it a big part of the care continuum. As a percentage of the total diagnostic imaging, teleradiology is growing. And not only that, the number of prelims is shrinking and the number of finals is growing. You know, the industry started as a prelim convenient type of a business, but it's really a part of the core patient care experience. We focus on emergent medicine and we're really, really good at it, but we're seeing a lot of growth in daytime imaging as well. COVID obviously put the spotlight on telehealth, something that, teleradiology brings a lot of value in terms of physician safety and access to, being able to do their job from home. Hospitals have access to specialists and subspecialists in diagnostic radiology in a way that was always there, but now all of a sudden with COVID, it became a necessity, and we were already there, right? We perfected the tele aspect of radiology. So we've seen a big uptick in volumes. We're now in a post-COVID world, and what I mean by that is that volume trending is now exceeded what it was before COVID. The industry as a whole lost a lot of volume in the system because of COVID, and not only are we back, we're seeing trajectory of growth beyond pre-COVID levels. And I'm seeing this in the tele space as well as in the hospital space. I mean, that is a consistent trend with all of radiology.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind when we talk about teleradiology is that we as a business, all of us, vRad, as well as non-vRad, hospitals, radiologists, healthcare, IT, informatics, executives, all of us are challenged by what we call a capacity demand imbalance. There are just way more procedures than radiologists are able to handle. And that trend continues. There's trajectory of volume increases based on population demographics, based on new techniques in imaging, based on any dimension you measure it at, the trajectory is growth on imaging. In contrast, the number of radiologists and the number of seats available in medical schools is flat, maybe slightly growing, and more than half radiologists are over the age of 50, 55. So there's going to be a whole bunch of retirements in the system as well. So this capacity demand imbalance is a problem that can be solved, or at least a huge impact with technology. This is something that me, Brian, the whole team at vRad, from a technology perspective, I'll always focus on. How can we make the radiologist more efficient so we can tackle this capacity demand imbalance?
No, that's a great insight. And I think the other thing we always think about when I talk to our partners in teleradiology is there is the demand supply imbalance. There is also a constant pressure on turnaround times, right? Like at a hospital, there may still be some leeway on reporting late. There is no leeway when you're in a teleradiology group. You have very strict SLAs. So a question maybe for both of you, what do you see different in terms of the engineering work that both of you lead to enable your radiologists and your clinicians to perform with the increasing load and a parallel pressure on turnaround times?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with a few sentences and hand it off to Brian for his input and insight. Obviously, turnaround time is a big part of our business and a big part of client satisfaction and ultimately a big part of patient care. So we keep a very, very close eye on it. And we build a whole bunch of tooling to make sure the right study is assigned to the right physician at the right time so we can achieve that turnaround time. And from we've built a whole bunch of stroke protocol and trauma protocol and ways for the clients to interact with us to better understand their status and the urgency. It's something that we do really, really well. We have a whole bunch of patents in our platform that we built from the ground up, specifically focused on turnaround time. Some of it is actually really, really cool in that we can take a study and separate out the images, typically by the clavicle, and give the same study to two different radiologists that can read at the same time, and then we collate the report and send it out as a single document at the other end. So there's a notification, so the doctors know that they're working on the same study, and it shaves a minute or so off the turnaround time. So really cool stuff. And the other thing we started doing a few years ago is, well, how can we make all of that better with AI? And that's kind of, I think, the cue where I hand it off to Brian. We've done a lot of really cool things to make that finely tuned and a much better experience for our patients.
Yeah, and I'll start off with kind of two things that are important about vRad to kind of understand our approach, which is that we're very practical, and we're also a bit cautious, and in a good way, I think with AI. And that really leads into, as we took a look at what can AI do and looked at it as a tool for the practice, two things really came to front. One is we want to start using it as soon as possible. And really the first use case that came to light is prioritizing work lists. And for us, like Imad mentioned, there's so many rules and things that we've learned over the years that go into play, that truly AI is just yet another factor that comes into play for that prioritization process. And so what we started with is we built an inference engine that can scale. And so we process on our various models anywhere between 10 to almost 20,000 studies a night, depending on the volumes, et cetera. And before we actually use any model, what we do is we plug it into that inference engine and run it for about 2 weeks, and we gather metrics. We look at what is the sensitivity, what is the specificity, and that's all automated. So we're using natural language processing against the reports that are coming from the radiologist to essentially ask, was this true for this condition or negative? And then coupled to that is we also focused, on pathologies. So when you're working on AI, there are really kind of two choices that you really have to make. One is, what is your clinical use case? In this case, it's prioritization. But then what is the pathologies that you're looking at? And we're obviously emergent focused, and so naturally, we really zoomed in on, okay, these are the things that can impact patients' lives. So pulmonary embolisms, intracranial hemorrhages, strokes, pneumothorax, aortic dissections. These pathologies were minutes matter, and so that has the highest impact. And so what we do is we plug these models into our inference engine. We run them for 2 weeks and we take a look at the metrics. And really it boils down to, what's the sensitivity, what's the specificity. But in terms of, how we think about it, how many patients are we helping, right? So how many patients got prioritized, whose life might have been saved, either because, something came in as a non-emergent and there happened to be something that really truly was emergent and we boosted it and prioritized it on the work list, or that was already came in as emergent but really need to be treated almost as critical as trauma or stroke. And we take a look at those numbers, and then we also calculate what is the overall impact to the rest of the patients that aren't prioritized. And so we aim for really high specificities. And what that means is that we're having really low false positives. And anytime we prioritize one study over the other, whether it's AI or anything, right, we have to go through this ethical exercise of, is this fair to the other patients that didn't get prioritized? And so we're already used to doing that. And so AI just became yet another question where we go, is this fair? And so what we do is we analyze, all those false positives that are happening. We shrink that as low as possible, and it becomes seconds that are being impacted on other studies, right? And so it's very, very low. And that's how we sort of get really confident with being able to prioritize. And again, that use case of prioritization and those pathologies really started to have an early impact and kind of exciting stories of, hey, AI caught this, boosted it, and we shaved 10 minutes off of a turnaround from getting you into the door to surgery for certain conditions. So it really was exciting.
No, that's super insightful. I think a couple of things that both of you said really resonated with me. One, obviously, there is an end patient impact. It's not just technology for the sake of efficiency. There is a real impact on lives that you're concerned about. And the second thing, which Brian, you said, was starting with a real clinical use case. It's not, again, AI for the sake of, yes, it's fancy and it's cool, so let's use AI, but it's about defining an exact use case. What I can make out is obviously you're very advanced in your journey in terms of how you've deployed this, how you've thought through this. What's been the response of the clinicians? Because a lot of times, at least in the press, there is this thing about clinicians getting afraid of AI or not being welcoming. What has been the response at vRad when both of you have led those initiatives?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate to have pretty enthusiastic response from our radiologists and other clinical users, and I attribute that to a couple of things. One is, 5 years ago or whatever, the headlines were AI is going to take over radiology, and those of us who had worked in this space and any kind of computer space or read between the lines were kind of like, what? No. And for me, at least, like I would have these conversations early on, and I would have trouble empathizing with the radiologists of this concern, because I was like, we're so far from there. Let's take a step back. And then you couple that with, at least for us, just a healthy amount of skepticism and an understanding of where do we plug this into our engineering? How much time do we prioritize on this? Really becomes how do you focus again on that use case? And so all of that messaging sort of came together, right? Of, this is going to be a lot harder than it looks. So don't be afraid, but also don't be surprised when in 5 years it's not what you thought it was going to be. And so really those kind of two distinct threads really wound together to help us message to our radiologists, where a lot of those original fears have kind of faded away. And I would even say, now, certainly not every radiologist, but quite a few radiologists ask the other side of the question, which is, hey, I've been hearing about this AI thing for 5 years. Where the heck is it? And I think that's a great story to tell too, because what the answer is well, it's really all around you, right? It's when you're dictating a report and our tools are, detecting that you had a critical pathology and asking you, hey, we're going to call this referring physician for you, to just the formatting of your report, to warning you, hey, you might have missed this criteria when you were reporting this, can you click this button to put in the right verbiage? All the way to, this study got prioritized. You may not know why it got prioritized, but this stuff is really, it's in the reading room, even though you don't notice it. And I think the fact that they don't notice it is because we were really cautious about, we don't want to, frighten radiologists, and more importantly, we don't want to disrupt them in their normal reading workflow, right? vRad's been doing this for a long time. We have a lot of just structure and process, and hey, how do we keep Rad's eyes on images, and how do we make sure that they have high quality, are turning these studies around for the patients as fast as we can. All of that stuff doesn't just go away with AI. You really need to blend the AI usage into those workflows, and so I think that naturally helped kind of quiet the rhetoric around AI is going to take over the world, or radiology at least, to really them not even noticing it at times, or when they do notice it, they're very happy for it. And then I would continue that conversation just as we've worked into the QA space, and we've been piloting some QA programs of, hey, the AI caught this, and the radiologist reports, doesn't have it in it, or says that it isn't there. Let's send it to our QA teams. As we've been catching those, not just our radiologists, but our clients and our patients, and their referring doctors are thankful, right? They're not, well, AI found that, I'm upset. They're, great. That's awesome if AI can see something, that I might have missed, and have that backstop. And so really, to be honest, the overall experience with clinical users has been very positive, even though we were very cautious to start with.
Yeah, no, wonderful thoughts. And maybe Imad, a question for you. I mean, Brian just mentioned about a lot of the work perhaps not being obvious or in front of the radiologist, yet supporting them at the back end with prioritization, with scheduling, with dictating reports, structuring the reports, all of that. What has been the impact from your end customers? Do the hospitals who send you exams, are they reporting higher satisfaction? Are you measuring any metrics to see the impact on your end customers or on patients as well?
We have, we've had consistent turnaround times for the last year. Now, I don't know if I can attribute that directly to AI, but it certainly has helped tremendously. A lot of our clients don't know a whole lot about the technology behind the scenes, but they're always very, very impressed and excited and curious when they find out that their studies are we have AI working behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of the end goal, is that the technology will be integrated and working behind the scenes. I mean, there's a famous video about Steve Jobs answering a question, and really, he was talking about, yes, we have PostScript and AppleTalk and a whole bunch of technologies in the printer, but ultimately, when the thing that sells it is you print out something and it looks really, really cool. And that's kind of in the same way. We have a report that comes out that is perfectly tuned to the customer's needs, specific customer's needs. But we have lots and lots of clients we service around the country, and they all have different needs in style, formatting, requirements for certain pathologies. There's a whole bunch of uniqueness. And really, ideally, is that they see the report and they go, yes, this is what I want. It's the right report at the right time, with a whole bunch of technology behind it that may or may not be visible to them. So that's kind of what I think. That's kind of where I think this is all heading. As much as I love talking about it, ultimately it needs to be kind of all around us, like Brian said, and really part of what we call, augmented radiology, right? This whole concept of, replacing radiologists, or is it disruptive? Yes, for sure. It's adding tremendous value. Yes, for sure. Is it replacing radiologists? No. Maybe in 20 years, 30 years, but not in the next 5 years. This is the hype cycle that we're all familiar with. Just like when Bitcoin first came out, people thought cash will disappear in a couple of years. It's just not the reality.
Great. No, completely agree. And I think we've been also, as an AI vendor, in some ways benefited by the hype, but also in some ways trying to temper it down and bring people more to what's the realistic value today, based on the solutions we've developed, versus making claims on it changing the world.
Sorry to interrupt you, but hype sometimes is good at the beginning, right?
Yes.
We're still very, very early in what AI is going to do to radiology. So we have the acceptance stage. We have the early adopters. Certainly, vRad was one of the innovators. You have the early adopters, and as we shift into the early majority, we're going to run into new challenges around every aspect of the radiology workflow, from ordering to scheduling to acquisition, post-processing, worklist, patient information, to the actual diagnostic experience of the radiologist, communication, components of the report, even follow-up and QA, and a whole bunch of things will be impacted by AI. So really, we're just at the very tip of the iceberg here, there's a lot of exciting new innovations will be coming our way.
Yeah, no, great to be part of that journey with you. One thing that, again, I think both of you mentioned, and I also referred to it a bit early, is the focus on patients as the North Star, right? Eventually, we're all in the healthcare business, industry, whatever you want to call it. And at the end, it's about delivering that care. Now, with a good chunk of vRad's work being emergent radiology. So these are all exams coming at night, all stat cases. Have you seen cases where the adoption of an AI tool has really impacted patient's care, bleed prioritization, saving a life, or helping restore brain function, or anything like that? And are those examples getting shared within your clinical team as well? Any of you?
I can take that. We do have we do have a handful of really cool patient stories, and unfortunately, it takes effort to track them down, and quite often a radiologist has to call. So we can't really, being once removed from the hospital, we don't have direct access into some of these insights. But we have tracked down a few cases and to kind of do a follow-up. And one of my favorite is there's the patient actually in Iowa. It's a rural hospital in Iowa that has an acute ICH. And it was not subtle. Like, it was like she had, like, any radiologist would look at it and say, yeah, we got to take care of this right away. It was not a subtle finding, but the value of AI here is that while that study is sitting on the work list, waiting to be read by human eyes, the AI was able to look at it and go, wait a minute, we really need to look at this right now. That's the kind of the concept of prioritization, is that what can we do while we're waiting for the radiologist to look at it. And in this case, we put it on the list of one of our neuroradiologists who happens to be in California, so a couple thousand miles away. There's there was a whole bunch of issues. There's a midline shift and subdural hematoma. There's a whole bunch of, this patient had some serious issues, and we were able to, the system recognized this, right? So the AI bumped it up on the list. The radiologist started dictating. The system notified the critical finding. We automatically dialed the phone number of the referring physician. We had them connected with the radiologist. This patient was rushed to the OR for surgery. And all of that happened in 3 minutes.
Wow. So
a patient in rural Iowa, a neuroradiologist in California, communication, AI, our inference engine, our study assigner, our auto dialer, our reporting system, all of it worked in concert to make sure this patient got into the OR, maybe 5, 8, 10, 12 minutes sooner than the otherwise would have happened. So follow-up exam indicated that the stroke did not progress because of the early intervention, and there's probably tens and tens of these stories that we see every week and every month. I wish we have the capacity to chase them all down, to be able to document it in a more from a patient's perspective. It's just we just don't have the capacity or access. But it's a really cool story about how AI contributed to probably save this patient's life, right? That certainly contributed to a very positive outcome of this patient's life.
No, it's amazing, and I think I marveled at obviously the role that AI played, but also the overall orchestration. You have the patient in one part of the country, the radiologist somewhere else, and then the entire calling of to the referral and making sure. So it takes, as they say, it takes an entire village, and I think what you guys have engineered is that entire coordination to get to that final print or that report. My next question is specifically to Brian. And Brian, you, I think, having worked with this for 5 years, you are one of the gurus or Yodas of how to make this AI work. So I love to hear some insights or some cool stories of things that you had never imagined as you started deploying these AI solutions, things that took you by surprise and needed a different level of engineering, or things which you had not planned for when you started these AI projects. So any cool stories or insights from those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll start out with, I certainly don't consider myself a guru or a Yoda by any means. I hope to one day maybe, but really it's just a journey of that I think many of us have been on together, of just trying to figure out how does this new tool fit into existing tools and existing processes? And yeah, there were some surprises along the way. I'll actually share that. I think right now, my biggest set of surprises that have come up has really been around QA and the ability to use these models to overread radiologists. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential there that we're going to end up really focusing on. We talk a lot about, I mentioned earlier, getting into the reading room and how, we're not necessarily gung ho about like, hey, we're going to show a box here or that, or, alerting a radiologist right away. We see a lot of value, early on and things in the background and prioritization and QA where we're not necessarily telling the radiologist or distracting, if you will, the radiologist. We're adding on to the overall processes that are happening as a practice. And so I think as we lit up the QA process that we've just started, we're really piloting it. Just the outcomes and the number of potential misses that have come up has really been enlightening. And to put that into some perspective, vRad has a really robust QA program, we'd want to get one of our clinicians on to talk about that more, but I'll just talk about a little bit in that. We overread, we do prelims, we do finals. Imad probably mentioned that 30-40% prelims right now, and so all of those prelims, right, are getting overread. We also have a QA portal that any client can go to submit a discrepancy. And then we also read around 1% of our studies are overread. And so we have a pretty robust QA platform that already exists where radiologists are overreading radiologists, and we know, how radiologists are doing, how many misses they have. I would say we have one of the, largest databases of that kind of data around, and it's fascinating. So without even AI coming into play, it's amazing. And when you start comparing yourselves to other practices, it's important to note, vRad, I forget the numbers off the head. I think it's, depending on what study you read, it's between like 3 and 9 misses per 1,000 cases, and vRad sits at about 1.1. So as I talk about that, just put that into perspective in that we already have fairly high quality, but you can always be better. And so these concepts of being able to overread basically every single chest CTA, right, for a pulmonary embolism, or every single head for an ICH or something like that, is just phenomenal. Like just being able to overread that much data is amazing. And so I think our that has been surprising to me. Just how powerful that is going to be, and where that fits into our roadmap and our pipeline. So already we get when we find in our pilot stuff, when we find one, we already have clients going, how can you find this even faster? Within 2 minutes or whatever. And so we're already envisioning how do we make that QA process more real time, or more efficient. Where I think that will end up pushing out other things that might have seemed more important a year ago. And it boils back to that you really focus on your use case and make your use case good and the process solid. So you're not really just using AI. It's really truly a new process that you've developed, and a new from a business perspective, just a new not an offering, but just a new enhanced workflow that can really help. And I do think that speaks to some of our clients. Hopefully as well our patients. But as Imad mentioned earlier, sometimes just there's not a whole lot the market can do about turnaround times going up. Sometimes we see turnaround times going up, but you turn around, you look everywhere else, every practice has turnaround times going up because there's just too much demand for the number of radiologists in the country. And I think when you start looking at that and you're looking at these tools like prioritization, it becomes that much more important, right? Because even when there just is too much demand on the system, you have that AI in the background going, even though there's too much demand and tats are high, if there is an ICH, it's going to be an intracranial hemorrhage. It's going to be bumped up to the top. If there's a massive pulmonary embolism, it's going to be bumped up to the top. And so that really helps, at least me as a patient or a potential patient. It makes me feel better, which is always one perspective I like to keep. And then, as clients to vRad, I know they appreciate that as well. So I would say, just kind of in lengthy summary here, the surprises are really, the use cases or the micro use cases that come out of these ideas that we have and these implementations that we have, where we start using AI and the radiologists go, well, what if we did that? And what if we did that? And what if we did that? And it really becomes a much more fully featured use of AI and enabling sometimes non-AI features out of that sort of, how do we use this new tool?
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation where you've not just defined the use case very specifically in terms of what is the value, but essentially it's not just about automating an existing workflow as it is using AI. You are also in many ways rethinking and improving the entire workflow or the process of that reporting. And I think I see multiple examples just during this conversation, what Imad and you mentioned, right from work list prioritization to how do they report, to QA, to scheduling. I was amazed by what Imad mentioned, where you were picking a study and actually in parallel giving it to 2 radiologists to read. So that's a completely new workflow or a way of doing it, but still achieving your goal of getting that fast report for the case that needs it and the patient who needs it. Great. No, that's it's been wonderful getting these insights from both of you. As always, it's a pleasure to share these experiences and thoughts, and I think it's been a pleasure working with you. Maybe any last thoughts, any predictions on post-COVID? Where do you see? What are you excited about as you're seeing more tools coming in the market, as you're seeing the adoption grow? Something new that's caught your eye, something that's exciting, or a prediction for the future while we end?
I'm gonna double down on the QA answer that Brian gave. I mean, that is really something where we're focused on this year quite a bit, and it takes a while. These things are not easy; they're not quick, and we're putting a lot of resources into enhancing the QA process. So hopefully we'll get a better handle on some of the regulatory and FDA implications of that, because that could really open up the door to a whole bunch of new innovations when it comes to patient safety and better outcomes.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I would say my insight for this year, and maybe this is my own COVID been hiding for 18 months. It's just it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so as we look to use AI in various use cases, digging in and really building the engineering tools and taking the time to do it right is it's going to be important. And so I would just encourage radiologists who are like, where is AI? Well, it's probably all around you. But also just have patience. If you want to get involved, ask. If your practice is doing it. I know we have a bunch of radiologists that are pretty involved, and just keep in mind, I guess it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that these use cases are going to evolve, and that we're going to learn how to use AI as we go here, and you can already see that just in the last 5 years, but that's probably the shape it's going to take the next 5 years. Is we're going to continue learning.
Yeah. No. I think couldn't have ended this with a better thought. I completely agree. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and that's exactly how we see it at Qure. And really a pleasure talking to both of you. Once again, pleasure to be part of this marathon with you as we are learning about our tools, about adoption, and it's not just accuracy, it's deployment. So always a pleasure. Thank you both for your time, and hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Yep.
great.
Thank you.